gonna start with a table saw, and Andre's gonna show you how to square up the blade.
Yeah, that's
and
it.
the whole process of doing a full sheet by yourself, how to do it.
Yep. And right now the blade, I was ripping some parts for a corner of a cabinet, so that's why it's at a 45-degree angle right now. So no, regardless, whenever I use a table saw, I always like to square up the blade. Even if it's at 90, I'll still take my square and square it up. So if you look under here, this knob right here raises and lowers the blade. If you tighten this set screw right here, that keeps it in place. So raise it. And this right here changes the bevel of the blade. And it has a readout with a dial, but it's not accurate. And you can see all the lines are huge, and I never go by that, regardless, no matter what.
And you can touch that dial and it just moves.
Yeah,
You can put it where you want.
it wobbles around, and so I'll get it. I'll crank it all the way, and you can feel it stop on you. And then I'll keep it loose. I'll take a combination square. And I'll make sure the blade's cranked all the way up. I'm going to put it right up against the blade, in between the gullet. And what I'm looking for is basically any daylight against the steel and the edge of my combination square. And that's pretty good. I'll check both sides. So that's pretty square. Sometimes, if it's just a hair off, you can see that daylight. And that's when I know I gotta kind of crank it over and get it pretty precisely to 90 degrees. And then I'll tighten it all the way and lower the blade. And I'll try to do that every single time I use this machine. Because you never know when people are cutting different bevels and, they forget to set it. Or sometimes, you're doing something like 3 degrees, 5 degrees, and then you go to cut your stock and go to square something up. It's all off.
It's a good thing if you're doing that and you're conscious of doing that and you know you're done, put it back to square. Because, it can piss you off when you go up there and you're like,
it's a good,
you're like, damn.
It's a good habit to get in, a really good habit to get in. I mean, if it's P&I, we're usually good with sending it back to square, and, because you're just by yourself all day, cutting square stock, sure. But if you're on a job site, right, you have, 20 guys using one table saw or whatever, 10 guys using one table saw. Sometimes I'll have my square in my pouch. I'll go real quick, crank it up, and just check. Because you never know. The worst thing that ever happens is when you're going to, you're going to cut a finished piece of trim or something. If you don't have a lot of material, right, and you're sure that blade's square, don't check it, run it through, and then go to fit something and it's off. It's all you have to do is square the blade up. So, say I want to get a perfect 45. This is my combination square. Combination square. Most combination squares, if not all of them, have a 45 set on them. So again, raise the blade a little bit. Now I'm going counterclockwise to go back to 45.
So if you had another angle besides 45, you could just go to your chop saw you know, set it for 22.5 or whatever you want, and then use that block, put it on the table saw like he's doing now.
That's a quick way to find 45. You can also reverse this, but then the teeth of the blade get stuck. And also this insert's kind of below, and then you can also go like this as well. And just see. And I know that's not bad. And now I'll square it back up. And that's pretty good. Check it both sides. And that's it. So now I'm just gonna lower it roughly to what I think the size of my stock's gonna be. And this is how I like to set the height of my blade. I know everyone has different ways to do it, but how I was taught was, so if you look at the anatomy of a saw blade, that's the kerf, and this little divot right here, that's called the gullet of the blade. And I always lower the blade. And I'll bring this up. I lower the blade so the bottom of the gullet is just slightly above my material. And P always says, you know, the higher the blade, the more fingers you're gonna lose, like, you know.
Yeah.
So that's how I do it. Some guys, you know, they'll go just so the kerf is below, but I like to keep below the gullet too, because so the kerf, the bottom of the kerf is a pretty good length above the material, so you'll get a clean cut without it being too high where you're in danger of losing a finger, a thumb, or whatever. All right.
Andre, when that blade is, say it's raised too high by accident, would you say it usually doesn't give you as straight as a cut as you would want because there's more flex on the blade?
There can be more deflection. There could. But
I actually think
yes.
if you're doing plywood and you're cross-cutting the plywood on that saw, the higher the blade with the teeth coming down is less chip out. If you try to do that with the blade very low and that, you tend to get a lot of chip outs and you get a kind of a ragged cut. Ripping it, it's fine to keep it low. My tendency is, I like his reasons, my tendency is to keep the blade up higher than he does. I find sometimes these sheets aren't totally flat, the table's not totally flat, and I hate being concerned that, you know, this plywood or something is warped and its blade's not going to totally come through. I tend to go, you know,
Yeah.
up to 3/4, ½ inch higher than the panel. Maybe that's not cool, but it's what I do.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It worked. Yeah.
Yeah,
Whatever works.
if
It's
you're
like,
comfortable and, you know, you feel safe about it, okay. We'll go with that.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
People, you're going to be different. You're going to hear 100 different ways of doing things.
Oh yeah.
You know, find what works for you. And
That's it. So we're gonna rip this sheet in half.
yeah.
Okay. Great.
So I'm making up these doors, and I roughly need 2-foot panels of MDF for the panels and the doors. I'm not just wasting material here. Jeff will be happy.
And I'm just gonna. I mean, you know, a sheet of plywood's usually 4 feet by 8 feet, but usually they could be under or over. So I'll always just throw my tape in. Look at that. We got 49 strong, 49 1/8. So I'll go 48 and 9/16 to the center. I mean, well, what do we have? 49 1/8. So I'll go 2 foot 9/16. And I always, the table saw we have a tape here, and if you guys look at it, most job site saws have this too, and there's a little line here that shows you, you know, how long, what your measurement is from the inside of the blade to the fence. I don't even look at that. I think it's, I mean, because it's accurate, but it's to a certain extent. It's only, you know, there's, if I measure 11 inches with my tape, I'm like a 32nd, maybe almost a 16th shy of 11. So, and that has to do with, you know, and I'm sure a lot of you guys know this, that every single tape basically measures different to some extent. Like Stanley tapes are different from Milwaukee tapes. I mean, you put even if I put two Stanley tapes together, they might be slightly off. So that also goes to whatever tape you use to measure, that's the tape you're gonna cut with, and for everything. So if I want to get 2.5 feet, the blade, the teeth alternate each way. So I'll look down the blade and I'll find a tooth that's facing this direction. And I'm gonna get that. I'm gonna look right to the right of that tooth and line it up with 24.5. Sometimes the fence moves on you a little bit. So that's 24.5 right there. And I'll double check it. Great. I think we're just gonna have to clear out. Thanks. Turn the dust collector on. You might have to move a little bit. I'm gonna check, I'm just gonna clear this. I mean, yeah, we got plenty of room. All right, this thing's flimsy. Watch out, guys. I like to get it kind of set up on the saw first. Just make sure everything's clear, nothing's behind you. You have a clear path in front of you. I'll always check if there's something on the saw, even like dust particles that are on the, like even little stuff like that can kind of might mess you up. It'll go against the blade. Start the saw off. The start and the stop is right here. Before I do anything too, I'll always just inspect my edge and shut the saw off. I'll look down the edge, and sometimes manufacturers, plywood, they staple, you know, stickers and product codes and stuff onto the sides, and sometimes there'll be a staple there. Yeah. Nope. You're good. Great. So I'm just gonna look down the edge and just make sure there's no staple sticking out and other crap like that. I've had times where I'm in a rush and I'm halfway through ripping a sheet of plywood, and you know, I'm like, why isn't it going? You know, what's on the saw? And what do you know? There's a staple. You know, there's something there. So that's what I'm looking out for.
And one thing to focus on is, I mean, he's going to pick up the sheet and hold it. He's going to try to keep pressure against the fence, pressure down, and then pressure going that way, so 3 ways. So when he's holding the sheet up, he's not focused on the blade, but he's focusing, come on, so you can on this side. Because if you focus on the blade, you know, you don't know what really is going to happen. So you got to make sure that this and that, and when you get it right, then you start. And you keep your focus on there. And the whole time he's doing it, he's pushing against the fence. You know, it's kind of a, you get the feel for the amount of pressure you're gonna have. And then when he gets, well, I'm gonna let him continue on from there.
Yeah,
but-
yeah. All right, dust collection. Start the machine up. Pick the sheet up. This is floppy. And I'm just looking at that fence. Nothing else matters to me. Shut the machine off. I always like to make sure I shut the machine off before I touch anything to the left of the blade. That is a huge, huge cause of kickback, basically, because when that blade's still spinning and you try to move this out of the way, get right against the blade and come right back at you. So always like to make sure I push through my cut, get it clear of the blade, shut the machine off, then you can do whatever you want with the material. I'm not concerned at all what's going on to the left of the blade. What matters to me is the material between the blade and the fence and getting that cleanly through. And as I was pushing that through, I had my eye on the fence the entire time. You want to make sure you keep that material as tight to the fence, and if you have to make adjustments to keep it tight, do so and get it right through. But now I'll show you guys how I like the gain cut material on the crosscut sled.
What do you mean by gain cutting?
Gain cutting is just cutting more than one piece, basically. Like you gain cut roof rafters, you know, you gain cut studs. And so say I have to cut, you know, let me see here. Say I'm making a small little wine cabinet or something, and I need like a bunch of 3-inch, 4-inch rails. So stop blocks are awesome for anything. I'll move the fence up to the blade here. And I'm just gonna do a bunch of 3-inch cuts. So now I'm looking to the left side of the kerf. I'm gonna line my tape up here. And also, sometimes I throw that out the building, and I always keep a folding rule in my back pocket. And these are nice too because they're not wobbly and you're not getting this and this, and these are awesome. I'll line that up. There's my 3 inches. Oh, time to set it so it's right out of the way. If you're in a rush or whatever, you can even screw this thing down, nail it. And if you nail it though, you're gonna pull the nails out and whatever you wanna do. Clamping's usually a good way to go. Start the dust. This is my square edge that I cut. Make sure this is out of the way. Double check the height of my blade. I'm gonna bring it up just a little bit. Cool. I don't like to jam my material into this because it's only clamped, and if I really push on it, the block might move and it's going to change your dimensions. So I'm just lightly hitting the block. There's one. You can go on and on and on all day. And I have 4 pretty perfect 3-inch little pieces there. Then what I also like to do is I'll use the fence to my advantage too. Say I have to cut, I'm doing a big cabinet or cutting trim and I need to cut baseboard all at the same length, over 2 feet. Consider this baseboard. So I'll call it, we'll do like 28-inch. Say I need like a bunch of 28-inch identical, I don't know, rails or, pieces of crown molding or whatever. I'll use a block like this. And I'll get it pretty close to where that kerf is going to be. Double check it. Cool. I'll set the block up right over here. And I mentioned before that I never like the material to ride against the fence when I'm cross-cutting. So basically what's going to happen is this block is going to be our depth guide. And I'll set the clamp up so it hopefully won't get in the way of our material. That's pretty good right there. Perfect. Start with a square edge. Turn the dust on. Basically what I'm doing is just lightly pushing into my block. And there's not one moment where the material is riding against the block and cutting on the blade at the same time. And if there is, you might want to move the block back a little bit or whatever. And that, things like little methods and jigs like this come great in any situation when it comes to trim and doing stuff on job sites. And so now we're gonna put the dado stack in, and we're gonna show how to do rabbets and dados. Now, there's a huge debate between rabbets and dado. What's a rabbet and what's a dado? How I learned is a rabbet is anytime you're slotting out material with the grain or along the longest piece of the material. So before I touch the blade, we'll make sure the power is shut off, and I'll double check it too. And that should be a habit, even anywhere, you operate any tool, any blade, unplug it.
We keep the wrenches back here hanging up. There's 2 wrenches to take off the blade. I'll show them how to do this one. You generally have to comfortably get this off. You got to raise this blade almost all the way up. And it's not so much to get this one off, it's to put the other one on, because they're only like an 8-inch diameter. So on here, there's a nut, the arbor nut right there. This goes on. There's 2 blades, and they look similar. You see the writing on it? You want that going out to the outside. Okay. So you figure these are 1/8 of an inch. And that is 1/8 of an inch. these chippers are 1/8 of an inch, and there's a 1/16 of an inch one down on the set. Now I put the first one on, and I always put a spacer. There's probably 5 or 6 of these in here. And what the spacers do is keep the chippers, this is a chipper, keeps the teeth. If I had just put this on here and jammed it tight, these teeth can like kind of actually go against each other, and it's going to dump up, something's going to go wrong. So you're going to put this spacer on. You're going to do your math. If you want a 1/2 inch, you need four chippers, not 4 chippers, 2 chippers, 2 blades. So I've got the blade on, I've got a washer. I gotta get the chipper so it's in a gullet, so it's not chipped. See if I go like hard to hard. So you try to space it so it's in there. Now if you're putting like 3 of these on, what I've done there was try to space them equally. So I've got these chippers so they're offset and kind of, you don't want all the weight in one side or one area of the thing. So you've got this faceplate that's already labeled dado to go on there. So you can see the line and you're just kissing the line. And you can either tape it off with a tape, or you can just sit there, if you put the mark on there, you take your tooth, and if that's where you want it, make sure you have a push stick. Now if we're doing long pieces, like I've got an 8-foot piece of plywood, I'm going to want something to keep pressure on this down. Something this short, I don't need it. So what we'll do is we'll actually, we could like put this on here. Would have to get rid of this piece on there. But then I could screw down a piece of plywood or something there that kind of kisses that and keeps consistent pressure on it. We can either do it with a feather board, which is, I don't know if you've seen it, just a bunch of slots in it, keep pressure on it, or we can just have this solid. The other thought you can do is just to put a feather board going into it, but I'm not ready to put the feather board on until I actually get this board on and started. You want a little pressure down on it. I should have backed this out a little bit so the blade's not starting and trying to start in material. All right. So it's straightforward.